Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode on SokoChain. We are a storytelling platform where we tell African blockchain stories through real experiences, real risks, and real opportunities out here. In today's episode, we're diving into a side of crypto that doesn't get enough attention, to be honest. We're talking about blockchain forensics and compliance and customer protection. While a lot of conversations around blockchain and crypto usually focus on the hype, the price movement, today's conversation focuses on trust, accountability, and safety for everyone who is engaging with crypto assets. While our guest brings a hands-on experience from the front lines of crypto investigations. He will help us understand what really goes wrong, how bad actors operate, and what really needs to change for virtual assets to be safely adopted and to be able to scale widely. So, if you've ever wondered how crypto crimes are tracked, what compliance actually looks like in practice, or how users can protect themselves, then this conversation is for you. So, without further ado, let's welcome our guest on stage, Mr. Sewe. Hi, Sewe.
Hello, hi, Faith.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing better than good. At least right now we're winding up the year 2025.
Yeah,
It's an awesome year.
yeah.
A lot of travelings happening across the city. So calm and relaxed, and we
Yeah.
enjoy it this way.
Yeah, it's
Um,
really. I was telling you before we started that you're the one who is ending the year for us, and it's such a timely conversation because this year has had a lot of improvements or growth within the crypto ecosystem globally, and more so in Kenya, where we are operating right now in a regulated environment. Crypto and blockchain projects are legal in Kenya. The law was passed sometime in October, and it's really good for anyone who is planning to engage with crypto assets in 2026 to know how they are protected. And what a timely it's such a timely season to be having this conversation as we wind up and even as we gear up to start a new year full of expectations and goals as well. It's good to know as um, investors of crypto assets, as consumers of um, the different projects that are coming up, how are we protected? But before we start, if you can just tell us your background and what sparked your interest into becoming a forensics expert within the blockchain space. Please tell us your story.
all right. Thank you so much, Faith, for such a wonderful introduction. And I'm actually humbled and privileged at the same time to know that I'm the guy who is wrapping up the year with this last podcast for 2025. And allow me also to thank you so much for having me on board and having this impactful and right on time discussions around crypto regulations,
Yeah.
uh, customer protection or consumer protection, the forensics bit of things, and all that. I believe we are going to dive deep as time goes by. But quickly, as I dive deep into my background, of course, I'm Sarah Wycliffe, and my background is in criminology and security studies. That's what I studied back then in college. And apart from that, I'm also a blockchain forensic specialist with A&D Forensics, where we normally support a lot of blockchain intelligence services. And I'm also a specialist in virtual assets compliance. So my background basically revolves around security, crime, and trying to just protect the space. Initially, before I uh, became a criminologist. Of course, I've had an opportunity to work in a medical environment. Sometimes I usually share this, and people wonder how.
That's quite
Yeah,
a
I happen to,
transition.
yes, I happened to be in the medical field, not as a doctor or a medical practitioner per se, but
Yeah.
I was in business development with one of the top pathological labs in Kenya by that time.
Yeah.
So it was in that field for quite a good number of years, around 6 or 7 years or so. Then immediately from there, I shifted to trading. During our introduction, you mentioned about people trading cryptocurrencies, and that is what is all known. So I did a lot of trading, and in my trading, I did a lot of forex. I did a lot, and that's when I also came across crypto back then when I was trading. But I
Yeah.
didn't exactly know what this is because I was only used to trading currency pairs. And then I think from there, that's when now I started again to transition into the field of criminology. And I think
Mhm.
what sparked my movement from trading to criminology is because during that season of trading, I noticed there's a lot of scams and conmanship happening in that ecosystem. And I was even wondering how do these guys usually get away? And do they usually even get reported in the first place? So I
Yeah.
noticed a lot going on in that particular space, and I think with me as say Wyclife, I usually love to operate in an ecosystem which appears to be more safe. So
Yeah.
that is one of the reasons which now made me go back to school, dive deep into criminology and security studies. So
Mm.
during my schooling days, when I was just having a word with a friend of mine, he's actually an ex-army. He served in the Israel armed forces. He's a good friend of mine. So during our discussions, he mentioned to me cryptocurrency again. And I was like, okay, what's interesting about it? And he told me, now that you're in criminology and security studies, what are you looking forward to becoming in terms of specializing in a particular area? And then he challenged me, that's a new space, it's a new ecosystem. If you can take up the challenge and become maybe one of the few professionals by then to be specialized in tackling crimes happening in that ecosystem. And
Mm.
without wasting time, uh, I shared with me some of the links where I could be able to learn, and I dived deep into serious learning, into being more intentional, doing a lot of certifications around that particular area until I was now be able to become a certified blockchain forensic specialist. So that's how the journey has been and how my interest was basically sparked from
Yeah.
the frauds which I experienced, and then now with this my colleague and friend who now decided to challenge me to explore that particular space. So that's how I found myself becoming a blockchain forensic specialist. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Ray.
That's quite an impressive journey. And I usually like saying that when we have these conversations and our guests introduce themselves and they give us a background of how they started, it's good to hear some a sense of relatability, because I'm sure there's someone out there who is wondering, because I also usually get these questions on different social platforms on how can I start in crypto, or I mean forex, how can I start? And it's good to hear somebody like you who was trading forex, then transitioned into crypto, and then it's when you were in the crypto space that you realized, oh, there's a lot of malpractice within the area. And with my background in um, you said criminology, that's what you did in campus. With your background, how can you be able to implement it in the space? And it's usually said the skills are transferable. You just need to identify where you can be able to transfer your skill, learn and build on them within the ecosystem. And that's quite commendable. And you're doing an amazing job because, as you've said, you've been able to build your career within the ecosystem. And we know you, people within the ecosystem, as a forensic expert within the space. So to now dive into our conversation for today, and if you can just tell us what usually happens within that we don't see, because we've, as you've said, there's usually a lot of um, gray areas that people usually see they can be able to scam people within the space. So where do you come in as an expert? Are you someone that I can come to as an individual and tell you, somebody came to me and told me I can be able to invest a certain amount of money, but now they've closed their website, or I can be able to access them? Or companies come to you, and you as the A&D Forensics, the company that you work for, they use softwares to be able to help companies. How does it work for somebody who does not understand? Are you operating to help individuals, or are you working to help companies so that people who interact with their products can be guaranteed safety? How does it work?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Maybe probably to kickstart it,
Yeah,
allow me first of all to clarify in terms of helping. So, our work mainly involves around supporting. I know with the law enforcement officers, they are the people who are mandated when it comes to making arrests, receiving those court orders, and doing all that other stuff as per the law. Uh, for us, especially me being in the private practice, my
yeah,
work is usually around providing expertise, and expertise in an area which maybe the law enforcement institutions may need uh,
yeah,
my services or our services. So we support investigations.
yeah,
We support banks when it comes to matters of risks and compliance in the virtual assets ecosystem.
yeah,
So when you mention about when, let's say, something has happened, can an individual reach out or can an institution reach out? It's usually uh, happens two ways. So number one way is that we are currently working in collaboration with our law enforcement officers, so
yeah,
that when a case, maybe probably an individual has reached out and has reported that X amount of their virtual assets got stolen, they were defrauded. So
yeah,
we will try as much as we can to maybe link you with the law enforcement so that you can be able to record the statement and do all that which is necessary. So our work behind the scenes is usually now trying to provide the forensics expertise, trying to show how those virtual assets were basically being moved within the virtual assets ecosystem. So
yeah,
I know in this space for the longest period of time, uh, people have known that once funds move to cryptocurrencies, they're lost and gone forever. And
yeah,
that's a myth which has been going around. And you see, yesterday I was actually having a discussion with someone, and when he looked at my qualification, he was like, "Can you be able to uh, uh, can you be able to do analysis and tell us if funds move to the Bitcoin?" Because according to them, they know that if
yeah,
funds get converted to Bitcoin, then that's the end of it. But ideally, that's not the case. When it comes to blockchain and cryptocurrencies,
mm,
it's actually we normally call it anonymous, pseudonymous. Pseudonymous basically means yes, there is that aspect for a layman cannot be able to tell who exactly is transacting in that particular space, but there is also a certain aspect when you now add some of the forensic bit, you can now be able to establish that
mm,
indeed Faith is the person who is moving these assets under
yeah,
this particular wallet. And
mm,
that's now what usually brings in our expertise. So if you come to, or if you look into our lab will now have those specialist softwares or tools which can be able to help us track and trace and be even
mm,
now to link a particular currency to a real life entity or a real world entity. Because with transactions which happen within the virtual assets ecosystem, there are transactions which do not have names. For example, if you look at, if I wire M-Pesa transaction to Faith, my
yeah,
M-Pesa will definitely come with my name, and you'll definitely come with my number. But
Yeah.
now you're coming to an ecosystem. If I wire cryptocurrency to Faith, then you can only be able to see addresses which are
Yeah.
transacting, and you can't be able to tell whether this is Sewe, Wyclife, or Faith who did that particular transaction. And I think that's the reason why, to some general people or general population,
Yeah.
they tend to think that with that makes it a little bit more hard to get to know who exactly did that particular transfer. And that's why now, with our profession, we are now coming to unveil that myth and start preaching the good gospel, telling them, in as much as scams and fraud might happen in that particular space, then we have specialized expertise who can be able to tell the story on what happened within that ecosystem, and also
Mm.
be able to bring the culprits or the offenders into books where they can be able to, the law can now be able to take it effect. So when it comes to reporting, yes, we did both have individuals who normally report to us, and we
Yeah.
still have institutions who normally reach out whenever a scam or a fraud has happened,
Yeah.
majorly the banks. Recently, we just did a major investigation from one of the largest banks in East Africa. When that case got reported to us, and our team, we just assisted when it comes to trying to reveal the real culprits behind the crypto transactions which took place. So both individuals and institutions can as well report, but all these cases we normally work in collaboration with law enforcement to ensure that justice has taken place. Thank you so much.
That's quite impressive to hear what usually goes in the background, because some of this is new information to so many of us, because as you said, what the aspect of crypto being anonymous, being pseudonymous, sorry. Then they also as the aspect of not being able to trace where the funds are have been moved to, and all of that. So that's really nice, and that's why we're having this conversation, so that our listeners and crypto investors out here can be able to be guaranteed of safety when interacting with virtual assets. Just that guarantee that, you know um, if anything goes wrong, I know that now that I'm protected by the law, I can this action can be taken, and we can be able to know where the money was moved from, because most of these scams usually happen in the sense that you put your money, then you're directed to a specific website. The website is functioning from a user point of view. You can see that things are working, but on the back end of things, there's a lot of malpractice that is happening. Then the money is transferred from that wallet to a completely different wallet, and you don't have access, because you don't know that money was sent to Kimani, Njoroge, Uteno, or so on and so forth. So you're not able to know. But just knowing that there are experts who can be able to assist with this, it's really quite commendable.
About on at least having um, experts within the ecosystem who can now
Yeah.
be able to support some aspects of investigations, fraud, which happens
Yeah.
within the ecosystem, and at least that should be more or less like an encouragement, especially to the consumers who probably have found themselves in a difficult situation, and
Mm.
some of them do not want to report, thinking that if they report, nothing might happen, thinking that if they report, there is no capacity or skills who people who can be able to deconstruct and be able to shed more light and even bring the culprits behind a particular offense into limelight. So I think that's the conversation which even the masses they are supposed uh, to get, knowing that especially for those who a fraud happens or a scam happens and they decide to stay away with it, they can now be encouraged to start reporting some of these cases, in order for them to get assistance. Now that we have expertise within the ecosystem, who can now be able to help in the constructing and also finding those people who are responsible. Thank you.
Thanks, Sewe. You've um, mentioned the process, how you work with um, law enforcement. So for a consumer or for a company that you work with, when a case is reported, you're not the one who does everything. You work in collaboration with law enforcement. If you can just give us like a rough, like a walkthrough of how an investigation process looks like. If me as Faith, something has happened to me, I've invested a certain amount of money in an exchange, and they've disappeared with my money. If you can just walk us through the investigation process, how does that happen, so that we can have a backstory of how the investigation process happens.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for the question. Uh, I may not be able to dive or share the nitty-gritties or the details, but I'll try to just summarize. You
Yeah.
see, also within this place, you don't know who is listening and who is watching, and with the bad actors, they normally sniff around things which are being discussed, and they're like, "Aha! So this is what usually happens." So,
Yeah.
so I only
Just
want to
don't
know
give
the
us
bit,
the
but
details that might
but
be
I'll
used
try to
against.
I'll try to mask some sections, but just trying to summarize in a way maybe probably our listeners will be able to understand, but
Yeah.
some aspects will be must. But
Yeah.
first and foremost, I know especially when it comes to crypto investigations, for example, of course, for a fraud or a crime to happen, then it means when someone is coming to report, then we will basically need them to have the addresses for both the person who was sending funds and the person who was receiving funds. Because if you tell us that you lost funds, then through crypto, then uh, common sense has it that there is an address which was sent to you, all
Yeah.
right, which you used to send those funds to. So those are the two things which you will be asked whenever you're reporting your case. And then you also need to have facts to know that how much was involved in this particular case, because
Yeah.
we have come across those people who normally come to report and they don't have this kind of details which will be helpful whenever we are doing preliminary investigations, or whenever now we are trying to dissect deep forensically. But we will need to have also an idea of how much are we basically talking about in terms of if it was in Kenya shillings, we want to know if it was converted into a particular cryptocurrency, you want to know how much are we talking about here,
Yeah.
because the cost of investigation is, to be honest, a little bit expensive. Because some people you'll find, sorry to say, maybe somebody got defrauded $200, which
Mm.
is money. I don't dispute that. $200 is money, yes. But now you
Yeah.
might realize that the amount of effort I'll use, especially to be able to investigate this particular case, and the
Mm.
tools and resources might go up thousands and thousands of cash. So we
Mm.
also try as much as we can to look at the case vis-a-vis how much effort will it need for us to be able to maybe probably take it in consideration. So we need that also. We also need to know when did this particular activity happen, all right? Because
Mm-hmm.
let's say maybe probably if it's a fraud case which happened last year and you're reporting it now, then chances of even support or maybe probably recovering those assets might be slim. And that's why we normally try as much as we can also to encourage most of the people who are reporting this kind of cases, whenever
Mm.
it happens, we should be quick to report. So once we have gotten all that, we normally do what is called preliminary investigation, trying to map out what might have happened within the blockchain ecosystem. A blockchain is basically a transparent ledger for those people who have operated in that particular ecosystem. And we normally tell, even whenever we are doing our trainings to different institutions, the banks, the law enforcement, insurance, lawyers, that's an open source place where you
Yeah.
can just be able to open it, see transactions happening. The only difference now is, do you really understand whatever you're looking for? Because it's an ecosystem which has a lot of information going on in that particular place. So you really need to have expertise knowing how to pull out information which is relevant to your particular case. So what normally happens during the preliminary investigation, we just want to understand and build a picture what exactly happened here. So we
Yeah.
will do preliminary checks within the blockchain explorers, trying to understand, build a picture around it. Are we able to map out this flow of funds? Were they usage of mixing services? Mixing services basically means a tactic which criminals usually do use to obfuscate or to hide their trails. We want to establish all that, what happened, so that now whenever we are communicating back to the institution or the individual, we tell them during the preliminary investigation we were able to spot this and this and this and this, and in order for us to move with supporting this case, then we will need this and this and this and this to be in place. So once the client is in agreement with that, we'll then issue them with a contract or an agreement form if they have to fill. All right. But they only fill it based on the preliminary investigation that has happened, and we have guided them or we have informed them of what is likely to happen. It's just like a consent form. The same way before an operation is done in an hospital, the doctor needs to explain to you and explain to you what is going to happen in this particular operation procedure, and we need your consent before we start digging deep. All right. So we
Yeah.
usually also try to explain that. So if there are cases which recovery is also possible based on the preliminary investigation, we will also
Yeah.
try to advise the client. If there are chances of recovery happening, we also try to advise the client from that aspect as well. And if there is no chances again peer as well, we also try as much as we can, because again with crypto, you understand the transactions usually move a little bit very fast. And if any delay in terms of reporting, any delay in terms of investigating, analyzing, it means the further the delay, the further it means chances of you maybe probably recovering some of the assets might be slim. All right. So ideally, that's usually what happens within the preliminary phase. Informing clients have to agree or sign the consent form, and then from there now we dive deep into investigations. So what normally happen,
Yeah.
the goal is usually to try as much as we can to identify the getaway. Getaway basically means, where did these funds got off ramped from? All right. And you see, at the end of the day, if you are operating within the crypto ecosystem, at the end of the day, you need to cash out. You need cash. You need liquid cash in order for you to operate or do some of your operations. So we
Yeah.
also try as much as we can to identify those cash out locations. So from there also, that's where now we try to bring the law enforcement. We try to also work around with the legal guys, because you need a court order, you need some form of affidavits, especially from the law enforcement, in order for you to be able to reach out to the institutions involved for cash out. The
Yeah.
same way in the normal traditional operating system, the law enforcement can immediately write to a particular bank and tell them, hey, there is illicit flows that were funneled to this particular bank by so and so. Could you please stop any transactions which are coming out from this particular account? And we need statements from this particular account, and we need the details for this, and this. Once they have been able to establish that ideally money was channeled through that particular financial institution. The same also happens within the crypto ecosystem. Once we have already established forensically that funds were cashed out or assets were cashed out in a particular exchange, then it means the law enforcement now will be able to write to that particular exchange a request for information about a particular wallet address. And the exchange, some of the exchanges they are wonderful. They normally collaborate wonderfully with law enforcement because they will always respond back with details. And then from those details, we will still do analysis and establish what are some of the transactions of our interest. So, because those are the ones which we are going to pick and maybe probably use them in order for us to develop a forensic report. So once that has been established, we have already been able to know who exactly was behind. Then the law enforcement now will proceed with other legal requirements in order for them to issue an arrest for that particular individual who has been identified, and then from there they'll find out whether that particular person needs to be taken to court, and now it proceeds from that particular point. So ideally, that's how the process usually works in a nutshell, in a summary. But
Yeah.
there is a lot which happens, some deep and heavy stuff. But that was just in summary. Thank you so much.
That's really good and very informative, because at least we have a background of what happens and the importance of having information as to how your assets can be protected. And what I've gotten from this is the importance of also us as investors to do our due diligence with the organizations or even the exchanges that we are looking into investing with, because if the company or the exchange you're gonna put your money into in terms of investment is not very compliant in the sense of having these measures into place, having people like you who come and offer education to the people who work in those organizations, for them to understand that these are some of the ways you can be able to mitigate these risks. These are some of the actions that are supposed to be taken. So it's really good for us to know, even us as investors, it's up to us to do due diligence. As it's say, do your own research before you make any investment, and also do your research on the places where you're tending to make this investment. So on to our next conversation, I want us to talk about compliance. And if you can just tell us what are some of the misunderstanding or like the different perceptions that people have about crypto compliance, because people look at compliance as a limit to innovation, because there's a lot of requirements that is set. So what are some of the misunderstanding and the perceptions that people have when it comes to compliance?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Faith. Yeah, and you see now that you have brought the aspect of compliance. In fact, I normally say compliance officers are usually uh, the usually non-celebrated heroes, and these guys they normally do a lot, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to because they're the first line of defense when it comes to illicit flows, whether in traditional banking ecosystem or within the virtual asset space, the
Yeah.
compliance plays a big role, right? And the reason why I'm saying so is because if you have weak controls in place, if you have weak policies in place, if you have a team which is not well trained and then knowledgeable in terms of matters of risks and compliance, then chances are your institution, all right, for lack of a better word, might end up being used by bad actors when it comes to being an enabler for these illicit acts. And even as we speak right now,
Yeah.
we have been supporting a lot of capacity buildings and trainings, especially for compliance officers across the continent. And recently, we noticed from one of our neighboring countries, when we
Yeah.
went there for a training, they noticed that some of these money remittance institutions or money remittance companies, some of these fintechs are basically being used as enablers when it comes to perpetrating some kinds of crime, and some of them they are facilitating terrorism financing even without them knowing. Some of them are facilitating money laundering even without them knowing. Only when you start digging deep, then you notice that they don't have proper controls in place. They don't have proper policies and procedures in place. They don't have competent personnel who can now be able to assist when it comes to as far as compliance is concerned. And that's why when you look at the Virtual Asset Service Providers Act, you see that act is has really touched on matters of compliance seriously, simply
Yeah.
because that is the space which even the bad actors usually try as much as they can to sniff institutions or firms with weak controls where they can be able to use that gap to commit these acts of crime. And that's why even with the act itself, once the virtual asset service providers who are currently coming to the ecosystem, they need to have robust AML KYCs in place to be put in place. They need to
Yeah.
have competent, all right, competent, those who have been thoroughly trained in the virtual assets ecosystem to get to understand what exactly happens within the virtual assets space. They need to be trained. How does cryptocurrency transactions really work? Because now with cryptocurrency, it's a totally different ballgame. And for compliance officers, they need to upskill in order to know what are the kind of risks which comes with virtual assets. Because there is a lot of risks which still comes with these virtual assets. And as we had mentioned, these traditional ecosystems, they are the ones which are being used to funnel such kind of illicit flows, and they're being off-ramped from that particular point. Then it means if a compliance officer is not well equipped with enough
Yeah.
knowledge, skills, and resources, then chances are the institution might basically be used to maybe probably enable such kind of acts. So our act is clear in order for the people who will be participating into the ecosystem to make sure that their compliance procedures are updated to accommodate virtual assets. They are supposed to also do the normal due diligence to get to know this particular client whom you are serving, where are his or her source of funds, what's basically happening. And you see now the beauty with blockchain intelligence, as we
Yeah.
spoke, we normally do what is called entity risking. Entity risking, whenever we are talking to virtual asset service providers or whenever we are talking to banks, we normally show them that within the blockchain intelligence or blockchain forensics, an
Yeah.
institution can be able to tell this particular client whom we are onboarding, given that most transactions normally happen on chain, with blockchain intelligence, one can be able to tell where the source of these particular funds are coming from, especially from this particular client. So if this client is banking with, let's say, Bank XY, through
Yeah.
blockchain intelligence, we can be able to advise the bank and tell them, with this customer whom you have onboarded, most of these transactions or most of these funds or currencies are coming either from darknet market, and this is an alarm. Or most of these transactions are basically coming from sanctioned jurisdictions, or they are coming from drug trafficking, or they are coming from terrorism financing. And that's the beauty with the blockchain intelligence. So with that, whenever an institution wants to onboard a particular client or firm or an individual, we normally tell them you only ask for the wallet address that they will be using. So from
Yeah.
that wallet address is able to share history about a particular institution. If it's a virtual asset service provider, we can now be able to tell and advise a bank and tell them these are some of the places which this particular person, most of his transactions are happening. So you really need to have such kind of controls in place, or you really need to have to update your risk score for this particular client, because we have seen some of these funds are tainted simply because they're coming from high risk jurisdictions, or they're being coming from, let's say, aspect of terrorism financing, and so on. So in order for jurisdictions to be more alert, especially when it comes to virtual assets,
Yeah.
then compliance bit really needs to be beefed up. They really need to rework around their procedures and controls, because the virtual assets game is a totally different compared to traditional financing. And that is also another aspect which we normally try as much as we can to support relevant institutions with. How do they now build a robust compliance ecosystem, from
Yeah.
training to having the right tools, so that they don't end up having or facilitating illicit flows, only for the regulators to start fining them without them knowing, simply because they didn't put the right procedures in place. So compliance is non-negotiable. When
Yeah.
people say stifling regulation, personally, I would say it helps a lot in order
Yeah.
to for us to maintain only people who are supposed to be operating within that ecosystem, and try as much as we can to avoid the bad guys from entering into the ecosystem. And that's why even when people say regulations are here to stifle innovation,
Yeah.
the only thing which stifles innovation is ignorance. Because if we don't know, and you have not been taught,
Yeah.
and you continue remaining ignorant, then chances are there is a lot of bad elements which are going to happen within that ecosystem, which will you not be able to get to know, and
Yeah.
then you will only be surprised when a fine has been issued to you as an institution. Then to some extent it might even taint your public image. So in order for you to avoid all such happenings coming to your doorstep, then you really need to start from the right footing. And the right footing basically means compliance procedures needs to be right from the word
Yeah.
go, in order for the clients and investors even to trust some of the services that you're issuing to your consumers. Once the compliance is right and
Mm.
it's being done the right way, then everything else will follow into places which are okay. Uh, I'll maybe probably leave that up to that extent. Yeah.
That's quite true and very informative, because as we know, blockchain and crypto is it's built on trust as we know it. So from your perspective, um, how can trust that has already been, we know trust once broken can never be rebuilt, but within the blockchain ecosystem, and we now the regulation in place, and knowing that all that the act requires in terms of compliance for crypto exchanges, as well as blockchain projects, we know like a lot of people have mistrust because of what the history that is there about crypto as we know it. But now moving forward, how can we be able to rebuild this trust with um, for us to be able to have mass adoption? Because there are a lot of people who have put a pause on investing or even getting involved with virtual assets for whatever reason that they have. But moving forward, how can we be able to rebuild that trust for consumers as well as investors and builders within the ecosystem?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Faith, for that. And maybe probably also something that our listeners need to understand. Blockchain technology is a very powerful technology.
Yeah.
And it's a debate which, for those people who do not have maybe probably enough information around it, they normally say, how comes if blockchain technology is so powerful, how comes we are experiencing cases of scams, cases of theft, cases of hacks?
Yeah.
And that's a totally different ballgame. You see, now what normally happens in the criminal world, now that uh, in the criminology space, when bad actors notice that they cannot be able to break systems,
Mm.
all right? And we all know that how blockchain technology, that kind of system is robust, and it's a system which has brought trust in so many angles. So
Yeah.
what bad actors normally try to do now, if they cannot be able to break the technology, they will always now shift how they're operating. And the
Mm.
only easy thing they can be able to break is an individual or
Mm.
break human. And how
Yeah.
do they break human? They know that we are emotional beings. Human beings are emotional beings. And
Yeah.
our life is usually surrounded by greed. Our life is usually surrounded by fear. Our
Yeah.
life is usually surrounded by a lot of emotional things which happens. So with bad actors, what they normally do now, they try to master that
Yeah.
because they know that the technology which Faith is using, I cannot be able to break into it, but I can be
Yeah.
able to dance into Faith's emotion, and
Yeah.
Faith can be able to surrender her passwords without her knowing.
Yeah.
You see, so
Yeah.
and ideally, that's what has been rampant within the crypto ecosystem. When you look at how most of crimes have been happening, it's the issue is more psychological than system. Of course, the blockchain system, that one has restored trust within the financial ecosystem.
Yeah.
So the only remaining work or bit which needs to be built all together is to create a lot of awareness on how bad actors try to manipulate
Mm.
individuals, dance into their psychology, because
Yeah.
because now that is the only threat that we have within the ecosystem, individuals. And that's why even when you look at organizations, even if they have robust system, we normally have what is called internal threats. And internal threats are if criminals can be able to get only one person within that particular institution and
Yeah.
be able to manipulate them, then they
Yeah.
can be able to have access into that particular system. So
Yeah.
right now the shift, we are seeing shifts from the system threats to employee threats or
Mm.
internal threats who employees becomes part and parcel of maybe probably colluding with some of these bad actors. So I think in order for us to be able to rebuild trust within that ecosystem, and of
Mm.
course I'm glad that as you had mentioned right now in Kenya we currently have regulations and laws in place. And you see now, with laws in place, that is the first line of defense. And the
Yeah.
first line of defense basically means, with the law in place, now requires most of the service providers or the crypto players within this ecosystem, they must have licenses.
Mm.
You cannot be able to operate within the Kenyan's jurisdiction as per
If you
the
don't
new
have.
law without a license.
Yeah.
And it's through that, with the users, they'll now be able to know exactly who are the approved virtual asset service providers within the Kenyan ecosystem. So
Mm.
through that, it will restore trust to that level. Of when you look again at that particular act which we have, the
Yeah.
act states that with each and every virtual asset service provider, you need to have a clear anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing, and also have the customer due diligence requirements in place, and those policies and procedures needs to be in place, and those ones, they're being put in place in order to protect the space so that we don't have bad actors utilizing some of these platforms. And
Mm.
also with the Virtual Asset Service Providers Act, it has mentioned that with each and every virtual asset service provider, they need to have mechanisms on how they can be able to detect fraud. They need to also have mechanisms on how they can be able to report suspicious transactions, and they need to have all this in place, which basically means that compliance will no longer be optional as it has been before, but compliance will be a must-have for each and every virtual asset service provider in place. So if you look at what the regulations has basically put in place, if these particular firms will be able to adhere into them, then
Yeah.
also having a frameworks in place on how users can be educated, or we can be able to build that massive awareness, then ideally this will be mechanisms which I believe will be able to restore trust within that ecosystem. Thank you so much.
Yeah. 100% what you said. The act is restoring trust, and it's such a it outlines the requirements so nicely, such that if as a service provider, as a virtual asset service provider, you're not able to comply or you're not able to meet these requirements, then you're not handed over the license. And this ensures that as consumers we are 100% protected by law, because for anybody who is determined to be within the ecosystem and provide these services, you need to comply 100%. And that compliance is what gives consumers or investors an assurance that they are working with a provider who is regulated, who is able to, that your assets are safe with this particular provider, and you're guaranteed of safety as an investor, which is really good. So from your perspective, Sarah, if you can just give us your view on what virtual asset service providers and builders can be able to do for them to be able to ensure consumers are protected. I know our conversation from the beginning has just been in relation to consumer protection, but what are some of those things that you can give if you were to advise a service provider or a builder within the ecosystem? What are those key things you would tell them to have them in place to ensure that their customers are well protected?
All right. Thank you so much, Faith, for that. I think maybe probably I know our conversations has highlighted quite a good number of things that they need to
Yeah.
basically put in place. I know with builders or providers, some of the key things which are fundamental that they really need to have in place. Of course, number one, we talk about the policies. You see now with the policies, if as an organization you can't be operating without proper policies. I remember back then when, if you look at Africa, when we didn't have regulations, more so within the virtual assets ecosystem, we
Yeah.
saw some virtual asset service providers were doing what is called self-regulation, right?
Yeah.
As they were preparing for the nation or the country to prepare the bigger regulatory framework which will be adopted by each and every player. But you see, some of them were not waiting for the bigger regulatory framework. Some of them started with self-regulations, and with self-regulations, some of them started by updating their policies in place. Some of them started by building capacity and upskilling some of their staffs around
Yeah.
virtual assets, and also letting them know some of the illicit acts which normally happen within that ecosystem, and how, as an institution, they can be used by some of these bad actors to facilitate some of those crimes. So we saw some virtual asset service providers even started training some of their members, even minus the regulations. We saw also some of them decided to have internal controls in place. Some of them
Yeah.
already also started to have proper systems which can be able to screen transactions, which can be able to identify abnormal behavior. Some transactions which normally appear a little bit suspicious, some of them are already started building solutions around that to ensure that as a firm they have that self-regulation, so that even if the country would have a more national regulatory framework, but from them as a firm, they've decided to have all these measures in place to ensure that they don't become a weak link within the criminal ecosystem. And I think even with builders, we normally try to encourage them, especially with the systems that they're building. I know we have had an opportunity to even interact with some of the builders, and we normally tell them try even as much as you can to do things like penetration testing. I know for coders, they understand what penetration testing basically means. In order for uh, in order for you to be able to know if the system that you're basically building, does it have weak links which can be exploited.
Mm.
I know this usually sounds or maybe look like an additional extra cost for builders. I know some of them, they normally say, oh, it might add some other extra cost in whatever we're building, but it's
Yeah.
very much important, because you can imagine if you're building something which criminals will definitely sniff and identify weak links, and then automatically it means your system is going to be used to maybe probably facilitate some of these illicit acts. So in order for you to avoid that happening,
Yeah.
just make sure that you put proper measures and mechanisms in place, penetration testings for your systems. I know as a team we normally also support with that, and for serious builders they normally also opt for doing that. In order for them also, they want to bring systems which cannot be easily hacked by the bad actors, because remember, within the criminal ecosystem we normally say it only takes one bad actor, one chance for him to get it right. All right. But for you as an individual, you'll have to take several continuous measures every single day to make sure that your system does not become a weak link. But with
Mm.
bad actor, it only takes him one opportunity, because if he can only be able to sniff one weak link, then the damage is never always repairable. So for you to avoid all that to happen, prevention is always better than cure. We normally say that in this other world. So in order for you to prevent that, whatever solutions you're building, make sure that they're in line with what is required. Pen testing, please do that. If you are within the virtual asset service providers providing custodial wallet, providing exchange services, providing on ramp and off ramping, all that, also
Yeah.
make sure that the staff which you currently have in place, they are well equipped. You have the enough tools in place. I know some people normally say, but these tools are a little bit expensive. How will we be able to use to do transaction monitoring? And the tools are a little bit expensive.
Yeah.
It is only expensive if you have not received a fine on your doorstep. But the day now that we have regulations in place, be rest assured that the regulators will always be supervising, and some of these supervision will be even on-site supervisions where they come and start and look at do you have updated compliance procedures, do you have systems which can be able to help you to monitor suspicious transactions in place, do you have all these in place? And that's why even with all these conversations we normally tell most firms whom we are interacting with, there is a way how we can be able to support that. If you
Mm.
feel that they're a little bit more expensive, there is a way how we can always be able to support those initiatives, just to make sure
Yeah.
that you are in line with the regulations, so that you don't end up becoming a weak link which can be exploited by the bad actors. Yes.
That's what a way to almost come to the end of our conversation today, because as builders, as you've said, they need to build with what is required in mind so that they don't get that fine. And as you said, it's expensive until the fine hits your door. And that's quite true, because it's always said take precautions before anything happens. And I believe for anyone who's offering virtual asset services to people, you should ensure client safety first, because once all that is said, then everything else will just flow, because trust is built out of that. And when people trust your product, when people trust what you're offering in terms of service, that's how you're able to grow. So, Sewe, as we wind up, what advice would you tell somebody who is looking into entering blockchain investigations or even compliance?
All right. Thank you so much, Faith. It's been quite uh, an interesting discussion. I believe so. And I believe also with our viewers and listeners, they've been able to learn a few things here and there. I know to some extent, maybe I might have sounded a little bit more complex. I'm sorry about that. Maybe to some extent, some of my statements might have been a little bit more technical. I'm sorry about that. It was not intentional. But anyway, based on what we do, some things are just, I don't know how you can be able to, how do you call blockchain in Swahili?
Well,
How
I also don't
Yeah,
know.
I know for some people they're still asking. They say, "What is this blockchain this guy is talking about? What is this pen testing this person is basically talking about?" I know some words might have sounded a little bit more technical. I'm sorry
Yeah.
about that, but in a nutshell, this is what I will say in terms of advice. You see, uh, crypto adoption is here to stay. And
Yeah.
when you look at even some of the reports which are being mentioned by some of the global analytics firms, the likes of Chainalysis, for example, Kenya is one of the countries within the sub-Saharan Africa which is being ranked among the top when it comes to crypto adoption.
Mm.
And again, we have seen the wave of regulations across the African continent. When most governments noticed that they could not be able to wish away crypto adoption,
Yeah.
I'm glad that some of them have resorted to find a way how do we accommodate crypto, but in a more safer environment. And we saw Kenya joining that. We have seen South Africa, we've seen Mauritius, Ghana the other day. We've seen for them, they are also developing regulations in place. Maybe
Yeah.
hopefully in the next couple of weeks, they'll be also doing a release. See, Nigerians also are in the space working something out within that ecosystem. That clearly tells you that most jurisdictions they are in alignment and they really want to ensure that this is a safe place,
Mm.
especially for investors and other consumers. All right. And for those people who want to join this space, you can only be able to participate in a particular space if you understand the rules of the game, if
Yeah.
you understand how it operates, if you understand what moves the market, if you understand how criminals exploit that ecosystem. So it boils down to having relevant education or relevant knowledge.
Yeah.
So that's why, even if you look at the conversations we normally have with different institutions, firms, and consumers, you don't even need to rush and start knowing how do crypto can my crypto get investigated. You don't need to rush and see when can I be able to buy. Do I invest in this particular asset? Do I where do I put my money? So before you reach that level of where do I actually put my money,
Mm.
knowledge comes first. Have that understanding. What are
Yeah.
the safest assets I can be able to invest in? Have that understanding. How can criminals be able to exploit
Yeah.
some of the weak links within this ecosystem? And maybe probably my institution to some extent may be able to use it without our knowledge. Have
Yeah.
that knowledge, have that understanding. And that's why we have also tried to curate some of the trainings around virtual assets compliance, virtual assets risks, just to make sure that we support different institutions with that knowledge,
Mm.
even for compliance officers, risk professionals, investigators, fraud examiners, legal guys, people within the cyber and IT risks ecosystem, teams working in different virtual asset service providers, guys within the government institutions, regulators. We have decided to have different customized trainings that suits whatever they do. Because once you have that relevant training, then now you will be able to apply it on your area of operation to make sure that now you don't get caught flat-footed. For
Yeah.
compliance and risk officers, you don't end up your systems being used as the weak link. For investigators, you don't end up having scams and frauds that you cannot be able to investigate.
Mm.
So all this we have decided to design to ensure that the ecosystem can be well educated, they can be
Mm.
able to receive relevant information to help them continue building a safer ecosystem, or to help even some institution to onboard clients now that they have knowledge and understanding of what normally happens within the virtual assets ecosystem. So knowledge comes first.
What a way to end our conversation today. To our listeners, knowledge comes first. For those people who want to get into whatever field, but in this case, considering we're talking about blockchain and crypto, knowledge is key. And there's a lot of platforms that are offering education where you can just be able to dive in, listen to conversations, learn, and just get yourself equipped with the relevant information for you to know how to build your skills within a specific area in within the industry. So, Sewe, as we wind up, in true SokoChain fashion, we usually ask our guests in Africa in terms of blockchain adoption and now regulation, since we have so many African countries that are gearing up towards crypto regulation. If blockchain adoption and regulation was a book, what chapter would you say we are in right now?
Sorry, I think I missed. Maybe if you can come up again. I had missed the part of the question.
Yeah, I'm saying in the true Soko chain fashion, we usually wind up our conversation by asking our guests that if
Yes.
blockchain and crypto adoption was a book here in Africa, what chapter would you say we are in right now?
Wow. If blockchain and crypto adoption was a book, then I
Yeah,
think you want me to say Africa in general.
yes, in Africa in general, in terms of where we are right now, considering where we've come from the like introduction of blockchain to now where we are in terms of a lot of jurisdictions are working towards having regulatory frameworks. Where will you say we are at in terms of adoption if it was a book and you were just told to say what chapter we are in, what will you say
Wow.
we are?
I think Africa Africa is actually one of the regions globally which has, to my understanding, Africa has really made crypto adoption go even times two, times three, or even times 10. The main reason I'm saying so is because
Yeah,
if you look at Africa in general, we have been having instances or challenges when it comes to cross border payments. For
yeah,
example, do you know how sometimes it's difficult just to make a payment? Let's say, maybe probably if you are from one jurisdiction within the African continent and you're
yeah,
making payments to a different or a different person based in another jurisdiction altogether, this has been a constant challenge ever since. And it's
mm,
been a process which has been very expensive, time consuming.
yeah,
And now, when crypto came into the ecosystem and people were able to know that indeed crypto is sorting out some of these issues in terms of cross-border payments in a way which is timely.
yeah,
Most payments are right now instantaneous in a way which it's globally accepted. Right now, I can definitely wire funds to maybe probably like right now there is a training which we are starting in January, and I've already done my payments, and I just asked them, "Do you accept payments via crypto?"
yeah,
All right. And when they told me yes, I just wired instantly
yeah,
my cost for training. So you can imagine Africa has really revolutionized uh, uh, matters of crypto adoption, and I think it's one of the continent which most major players focus on,
yeah,
because when it comes to aspect of also remittances, when it comes to aspect of savings, there is a lot which is happening. So in terms of a book, I would really say Africa appears among the first chapters,
mm,
first chapters, because
yeah,
there is a lot which has happened, which happens within this ecosystem. And you
yeah,
see now, if you look at countries like Nigeria, if you look at countries like Kenya, if you look at countries like South Africa, globally,
yeah,
Nigeria is playing among the top five in terms of crypto adoption
mm,
globally. And you can imagine how many countries do we have across the across the continent. Kenya is appearing among the top 30s globally. So it tells you Africa is actually at the front seat when it
Yeah.
comes to crypto adoption. So to me, if in chapter 1 we were talking about crypto adoption, then Africa will feature in chapter 1. It's depending on what is
Wow.
being discussed in that particular chapter. So Africa is actually at the forefront chapters in terms
Yeah.
of adoption. Yes.
That's a great way to end our conversation today, Sewe. As you heard to our listeners, Africa, we are in chapter 1. We are setting up the stage and we are taking it hands on. So thank you so much, Sewe, for honoring our invite today and coming and sharing your insights on this amazing conversation about blockchain forensics and consumer protection. This conversation today reminds us that for blockchain and crypto to truly serve people safely, trust must come first. And innovation without protection leaves us exposed as users of these services and investors of virtual assets. And it's conversations like this that help us to understand why education, compliance, and accountability, they aren't just optional, they are essential for adoption to happen within the globe. So, to our listeners, if you found value in this episode, share it with someone navigating the crypto ecosystem, or somebody who's building within the Web3 ecosystem, or simply trying to understand how this space really works. So, this is SokoChain. Until next time, happy holidays.